This woman actually fined me $4,200 for swimming in the lake I've owned for 18 years. I'm floating peacefully in crystal clear spring water, the sweet scent of honeysuckle drifting across my property line, when suddenly, Bethany Richardson, our self-appointed HOA dictator, storms across my private dock, wearing Louboutin heels that click like a metronome of impending disaster. Her perfectly manicured fingers wave a certified letter like it's a weapon of mass destruction. "You're in violation of Community Standards Ordinance 52D, she announces, with the theatrical flair of someone who's never been told no in her entire privileged existence. The paper trembles in my wet hands as I read the most insane demand I've ever encountered: $4,200 for swimming in my own lake. My own lake that my grandfather built with his bare hands when Harry Truman was president. My 10-year-old daughter Sophia stops building her sandcastle, confusion clouding her bright blue eyes. The metallic taste of pure rage floods my mouth as I realize this psychopath is trying to steal the lake my grandfather built in 1946, 3 decades before her cookie-cutter subdivision was even a developer's wet dream. But here's what Bethany Richardson didn't know about Virginia property law, forensic accounting, or the very expensive legal mistake she was about to make. What would you do if your HOA Karen pulled this nuclear-level insanity? Drop it in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing these stories spread across America. Let me back up and tell you how this suburban sociopath turned my peaceful lakeside paradise into a legal battleground that would end with federal agents, handcuffs, and the most spectacular courtroom meltdown in HOA history. My name is Jake Morrison, and I'm a 42-year-old software engineer who thought moving to rural Virginia would mean peace, quiet, and teaching my daughter how to fish in the same waters where 3 generations of my family learned life's most important lessons. I was spectacularly wrong about the peace and quiet part. This lake isn't just property to me, it's living American history. My grandfather, Robert Morrison, returned from World War II in 1946 with nothing but GI Bill benefits and an unshakable determination to build something lasting for his family. He bought 35 acres of Virginia countryside for $1,200, which was every penny he'd saved during 4 years of Pacific Theater combat. The musty smell of his original tackle box still haunts my workshop, mixed with memories of Saturday morning and fishing lessons and the satisfying plop of bobbers hitting mirror-smooth water. Grandpa spent 3 summers digging this 4-acre lake by hand, using nothing but shovels, determination, and help from neighbors who understood what it meant to build the American dream from scratch. When Grandpa passed in 1984, he left my father something priceless, not just land, but legacy. Dad expanded the property, building the cabin where I now live and the dock where Sophia takes her first tentative steps toward independence. When Dad died in a factory accident 8 years ago, I inherited more than real estate. I inherited responsibility for preserving what our family had built from nothing. The divorce from Sophia's mother 3 years ago made this place my sanctuary, the one constant in a world that suddenly felt unstable and unpredictable. Sophia spends every other weekend with me, and this lake is where we have our deepest conversations, where she asks those big life questions while base jump for insects in the evening light, where she's learning that some things in life are worth fighting for, no matter how powerful your enemies think they are. Picture this place. 35 acres of rolling Virginia hills surrounding a spring-fed lake so clear you can count bluegill swimming 15 feet down. Ancient oak trees that were already giants when my grandfather arrived, their branches creating a natural cathedral over water that reflects the sky like polished glass. Every dawn, mist rises like spirits dancing on the surface while red-winged blackbirds call across the water, with voices older than memory. The property line extends 150 feet past the water line, something I learned during the divorce when lawyers made me survey everything down to the inch. Back then, I didn't realize that boundary survey would become my most valuable weapon in the war Bethany Richardson was about to declare. Enter Bethany Richardson, stage right, like a villain from a soap opera written by someone who'd studied every HOA horror story and decided to turn the evil up to 11. This woman moved here from Connecticut 2 years ago and immediately bought the biggest house in Magnolia Springs Estates. 5,800 square feet of suburban intimidation with a 3-car garage, imported granite countertops, and the warm personality of an IRS audit. She drives a pearl white Escalade with personalized plates reading Presid 1, and maintains a lawn so chemically perfect it looks like green carpet designed by someone who'd never seen actual grass. Within 8 months of moving in, she'd maneuvered herself into HOA president by promising to maximize property values through strict enforcement of community excellence standards. Political doublespeak that really meant, I'm going to make your lives miserable with my ruler and God complex. Before Bethany's reign of terror, our HOA was run by Bill Thompson, a retired Air Force colonel who kept things simple and neighborly. Monthly fees were $75, covering basic maintenance, Christmas decorations, and the kind of community spirit that made people actually want to live here. Everyone knew each other's kids. Neighbors helped neighbors move furniture. People waved when they drove past. Bethany cranked those fees up to $320 per month, faster than you could say fiscal responsibility. She claimed we needed enterprise-level property management and enhanced compliance monitoring. What we got was Bethany patrolling the neighborhood with an actual tape measure, photographing garbage cans left out past 7 p.m., and creating violation reports that read like they'd been written by someone who'd studied fascist regimes for inspiration. The Johnson family down on Elm Street got slapped with a $950 fine because their 9-year-old daughter had set up a sidewalk chalk art display during a neighborhood block party. Bethany's citation claimed it was unauthorized street modification in violation of municipal aesthetic standards. A little girl drawing rainbows with sidewalk chalk. Rainbows. Mrs. Williams, the sweet retired teacher, who'd been organizing the annual Halloween parade for 12 years, received a $750 violation for excessive seasonal decoration density. Her crime? 6 carved pumpkins on her front porch and a friendly ghost made from bedsheets hanging from her oak tree. 6 pumpkins and a bedsheet ghost. I started researching Virginia HOA law after watching my neighbors get systematically terrorized by a woman who seemed to derive actual pleasure from other people's misery. Turns out, there's something called pre-existing property rights that protects land ownership established before HOA formation. Property that predates community covenants can't be retroactively restricted by new rules, no matter how creative the legal language. That legal principle would prove more valuable than cryptocurrency during a bull market. But Bethany Richardson wasn't just power-hungry. She was calculating, methodical, and absolutely ruthless in ways that would make corporate raiders take notes. She'd done her homework on legal loopholes, municipal regulations, and the kind of bureaucratic warfare that destroys property owners who don't know their rights. The harassment started small and escalated with the precision of a military campaign. First came the courtesy visits, where Bethany would click across my gravel driveway in her designer heels, a sound like someone tap dancing on broken glass, bringing store-bought cookies while making passive-aggressive observations about my non-conforming landscape choices. Your property has such rustic charm, she'd say, her voice dripping with manufactured concern, while her eyes calculated property values like a real estate vulture circling wounded prey. The overpowering scent of her imported French perfume would linger in the humid air long after she left, mixing with the natural honeysuckle breeze like expensive air freshener in a funeral home. When I politely declined her generous offer to buy my land for 35 cents on the dollar, supposedly to preserve it as community green space managed by qualified professionals, her plastic smile turned predatory. That manicured mask slipped just enough to show the calculating shark underneath, and I realized I wasn't dealing with a reasonable person. I was dealing with someone who viewed power as a tool for personal enrichment, not community service. 4 weeks later, the first violation notice appeared. Complaint about my unpermitted waterfront structure. I showed the county inspector permits from 2019, complete with engineering specifications and safety certifications that exceeded marina standards. The inspector actually whistled in appreciation and said my dock was better built than most commercial facilities. Case closed, or so I thought. Then Bethany claimed my fish were introducing invasive species that threaten regional ecosystem balance. The Virginia Department of Environmental Quality conducted a comprehensive biological survey that identified my lake as an exemplary model of sustainable freshwater habitat management. The biologist noted that my base population was actually helping control mosquito larvae better than chemical treatments. But Bethany had been studying forgotten municipal ordinances, like a law student cramming for the bar exam on steroids. She discovered a dormant 1943 wartime regulation about recreational water permits, the kind of bureaucratic fossil that survives in dusty legal codes like a virus waiting for the right host. During my software engineering career, I'd seen how ancient code vulnerabilities could be exploited by attackers who understood system architecture better than current administrators. Bethany was using the same strategy against property law, weaponizing legal archaeology to attack rights that should have been protected by common sense and basic fairness. She'd actually hired a legal research firm to dig through a century of forgotten Virginia regulations, looking for any obscure law that could be twisted into a weapon against property owners who didn't submit to her authority. The ordinance she found was originally written during World War II to prevent enemy sabotage of water supplies near military installations. It had never been repealed, just forgotten in the dusty archives of county legal departments. Most attorneys didn't even know it existed, which made it the perfect tool for someone planning to abuse government power for personal profit. She convinced 4 county commissioners, conveniently all former clients of her Connecticut property development consulting firm who owed their political careers to her fundraising efforts, to reactivate and amend the ordinance retroactively. The closed-door meetings where this happened weren't even properly announced to the public, violating Virginia's open government laws in ways that would later become additional federal charges. Suddenly, any recreational water activity within 500 feet of residential development required HOA approval, monthly permit fees of $200, quarterly environmental compliance reviews costing $500 each, and annual safety inspections through contractors who happened to be Bethany's business partners. She'd created a protection racket disguised as environmental regulation. My lake, which had existed for 75 years before her subdivision was even surveyed, was now subject to Bethany's authority and her family's financial benefit. The permits alone would cost me $3,200 annually, plus whatever bribes she demanded to actually approve them. The woman who'd lived here for 24 months was trying to control water that had been in my family for 3 generations, and she was planning to make thousands of dollars doing it. That's when she made her first catastrophic mistake. She declared war on a software engineer who specialized in finding hidden vulnerabilities in complex systems and exploiting them more effectively than the original attackers. Bad move, Bethany. Really catastrophically bad move. The certified letter that officially started our war arrived on a Wednesday morning while I was teaching Sophia how to cast near the cattails. Her little face scrunched in concentration as she practiced the wrist motion my grandfather had taught me 35 years earlier. The sound of gravel crunching under the postal truck's tires shattered our peaceful morning like a gunshot through cathedral silence. I tore open the envelope with hands still damp from lake water, and what I read made my blood pressure spike high enough to power the entire subdivision. The violation notice was the most insane piece of legal fiction I'd ever seen. $4,200. For swimming in my own lake. Bethany had actually itemized this extortion like a restaurant bill from hell. Unauthorized water usage, failure to get permits that didn't exist, violation of protocols she'd made up, administrative fees that were pure theft, and something called a contempt of authority surcharge that sounded like it came from a medieval torture manual. Payment due in 7 days, or they'd put a lien on my house and potentially foreclose on property my family had owned since before she was born. I stared at this legal fiction until the words started swimming together like minnows in shallow water. This psychopath was essentially charging me rent to swim in my own lake, water my grandfather had created with his bare hands when Harry Truman was president. Sophia tugged on my swim shorts with wet fingers. "Daddy, why does the mean lady want to steal our lake?" That question hit me like a physical blow to the chest. How do you explain to a 10-year-old that some people are so fundamentally broken they'll try to steal a family's entire history for the pure joy of exercising power over others? "She doesn't get our lake, princess," I said, pulling her close enough to smell the sunshine in her hair. "Some people think they can take what doesn't belong to them, but they're wrong. And Daddy's going to prove it in ways that'll make her very, very sorry she ever heard the name Morrison." That night, I did what any software engineer would do when facing a sophisticated cyber attack. I analyzed the threat vector, mapped the attack surface, and started building comprehensive defensive protocols with counter-offensive capabilities. 4 pots of coffee and 8 hours later, I'd mapped out Bethany's entire operation with the thoroughness of a Pentagon intelligence briefing. First discovery, Bethany Richardson wasn't her original name. Public records showed her birth name as Bethany Kowalski from Buffalo, New York. She'd legally changed it to Richardson in 2020, right after her real estate license was permanently revoked in New York for systematic client fund, misappropriation, and fraudulent property valuation schemes. The woman had literally rebranded herself like a tech startup, covering up a massive data breach. Second discovery, Magnolia Springs Estates. HOA finances showed patterns that would make forensic accountants weep tears of joy. Bethany's professional management company, Richardson Property Excellence LLC, was billing $9,600 per month for services the previous board had handled competently for $2,400. But when I cross-referenced the work orders against actual services provided, most of it was phantom billing for imaginary work. Landscape maintenance supposedly cost $2,800 monthly, but I'd photographed the same crew that had serviced the neighborhood for 6 years at their original rate of $950. Pool maintenance was billed at $1,300 monthly through AquaPro Elite Services, a company registered to Bethany's home address that existed nowhere except on HOA invoices and her imagination. Security monitoring services cost $1,100 monthly for cameras that had never been installed. Snow removal was billed year-round in Virginia. Professional consultation fees totaled $2,200 monthly for advice that consisted entirely of Bethany telling people what they couldn't do on their own property. But the crown jewel was legal and regulatory compliance fees, totaling $4,800 monthly. Bethany's brother-in-law's Connecticut law firm was billing Virginia homeowners for legal work that had absolutely nothing to do with HOA business. I found invoices for residential zoning consultation that was actually Bethany's personal divorce proceedings, environmental compliance review that was her son's college admission legal issues, and municipal liaison services that were parking tickets she'd accumulated during shopping trips to Richmond. Bethany had constructed a sophisticated money laundering operation disguised as professional property management. Every month, homeowner dues flowed into accounts she controlled, then got redistributed to family businesses through inflated contracts and completely fraudulent billing. She was stealing approximately $240,000 annually from working families while hiding behind a facade of community improvement and property value protection. The software engineering parallel was obvious. Bethany had infiltrated the HOA's financial infrastructure, established persistent administrative access through legal authority, and was systematically exfiltrating funds through legitimate-looking transactions. It was the exact same methodology hackers used to steal corporate data and financial assets, except she was stealing money from neighbors who trusted her with their community's future. But here's what Bethany didn't know about software engineers. We're professionally trained to think like attackers, identify every possible vulnerability, and build defense systems that can withstand coordinated assault from much smarter opponents. Bethany had just picked a fight with someone who specialized in exposing hidden criminal networks and had the technical skills to document everything in ways that would hold up in federal court. I started building my case the same way I'd investigate a corporate security breach, methodically, thoroughly, and with absolute attention to legal procedures that would create an unbreakable chain of evidence. Every document got photographed in high resolution. Every interaction got audio and video recorded. Every witness statement got properly notarized with timestamps and metadata. My first call was to Jennifer Hayes, a Richmond attorney who specialized in HOA fraud cases and had a reputation for eating corrupt board members alive in courtrooms across Virginia. Jennifer had seen this exact pattern before, out-of-state board members using their positions to funnel community funds into personal businesses while terrorizing residents who asked inconvenient questions. "Jake," she said, after reviewing my preliminary evidence package, "what you've uncovered isn't just HOA harassment or even simple embezzlement. This is systematic racketeering with potential federal implications. Wire fraud, mail fraud, conspiracy, money laundering. Bethany's looking at serious federal prison time, and her family businesses are facing asset forfeiture that could bankrupt them permanently." My second call went to the Virginia Department of Professional and Occupational Regulation, which oversees HOA management companies statewide. Turns out they'd been waiting for someone to file a formal complaint about Richardson Property Excellence LLC. We weren't the first community where Bethany's methods had raised red flags with state investigators. "Mr. Morrison," said investigator David Park, We've received 6 informal inquiries about Richardson's management practices in the past 14 months, 3 from homeowners in other counties, 2 from municipal attorneys, and 1 from the FBI's Economic Crimes Unit. You might be the missing piece that lets us build a comprehensive racketeering case. While I was gathering evidence and building my legal case, Bethany escalated to psychological warfare that would have impressed CIA operatives during the Cold War. She wasn't content with just stealing money. She wanted to destroy anyone who threatened her criminal enterprise through systematic character assassination and intimidation tactics. She hired a private investigator, some sketchy ex-cop named Rick Wade, who drove a beat-up Crown Victoria and wore cologne that smelled like desperation mixed with cigarettes and broken dreams. Wade had lost his police job in Connecticut for excessive force and evidence tampering, which made him perfect for Bethany's needs. Wade started following me around town with the subtlety of a rhinoceros in a china shop, taking pictures through my cabin windows with telephoto lenses, photographing my license plate at grocery stores, and even approaching Sophia's elementary school, claiming to be conducting a routine background check for insurance liability purposes. When Principal Martinez called me about a stranger, asking detailed questions about my daughter's schedule, pickup arrangements, and after-school activities, I knew Bethany had crossed every line that mattered to any decent human being. The same week Wade was stalking my family, Bethany launched a social media campaign designed to destroy my reputation before I could expose her criminal enterprise to the community. She created multiple fake Facebook profiles with AI-generated photos and convincing backstories, then started spreading rumors that I was planning to build a commercial fishing operation that would destroy property values and introduce environmental hazards to the entire neighborhood. She posted doctored screenshots of threatening messages allegedly from my social media accounts, complete with aggressive language and grammatical errors carefully designed to make them look authentic to anyone who didn't examine them closely. The fake messages threatened to destroy property values and run out anyone who opposed my supposed business plans. But the crown jewel of her character assassination campaign was claiming that my software engineering work involved suspicious late-night activities with unknown external parties that might pose cybersecurity risks to the entire community. She suggested I could be involved in identity theft, corporate espionage, or even international hacking operations that put everyone's personal information at risk. She was literally trying to turn my professional expertise and legitimate cybersecurity consulting work into evidence of potential terrorism or criminal activity, hoping to scare neighbors into supporting her efforts to destroy me before I could expose her crimes. But Bethany's biggest strategic error was underestimating both my technical capabilities and my capacity for righteous anger when someone threatens my daughter's safety and my family's legacy. While she was busy spreading lies on social media platforms and hiring criminals to stalk my family, I was conducting the kind of deep-dive digital forensics investigation that had made my cybersecurity consulting career incredibly lucrative and earned me a reputation for exposing corporate fraud that other investigators missed. What I discovered made my blood run cold. Bethany Richardson wasn't just a power-hungry HOA president with control issues. She was a serial community destroyer who'd been running the exact same scam across 7 different states for 15 years. Phoenix, Tampa, Charlotte, Nashville, Atlanta, Jacksonville, Richmond. She'd stolen over $1.2 million from working families before disappearing like smoke whenever law enforcement got close. The pattern was always identical. Move into an upscale neighborhood, promise professional management, jack up the fees, install family businesses as contractors, then vanish with the money when people started asking questions. She was like a financial cancer that destroyed communities for profit. In Charlotte alone, she'd stolen over $200,000 through fake legal fees before the FBI opened a multi-state investigation. In Tampa, she'd embezzled $127,000 through inflated maintenance contracts. The woman sitting in our community meetings with her fake smile and designer handbags was actually a federal fugitive who'd been stealing from neighbors for over a decade. The FBI had been tracking her for 18 months as part of a massive organized crime investigation. My evidence package would be the final piece they needed to bring down her entire criminal network. But first, I had to survive Bethany's escalating retaliation campaign. When she realized her social media attacks weren't silencing me, she decided to try direct intimidation through property destruction, harassment of my daughter, and physical threats that crossed into criminal territory. It started with my dock getting sabotaged on a Thursday night. I woke up Friday morning to find support cables severed with bolt cutters, deck boards loosened with precision tools, and my boat ladder missing crucial bolts that had been carefully removed rather than broken. The smell of fresh wood shavings mixed with lake water told me this wasn't weather damage or random vandalism. Someone had spent hours systematically destroying my property with surgical precision and professional tools. My newly installed security cameras had captured everything in high-definition detail: a figure in dark clothing and a baseball cap, spending 57 minutes methodically sabotaging my dock, starting at 2:34 a.m. The footage was crystal clear, and the body language and movement patterns obviously showed a middle-aged woman trying to disguise herself as a teenage vandal and failing miserably at it. Deputy Rodriguez examined the damage with the weary expression of someone who'd seen too much suburban drama for several lifetimes. Deliberate sabotage with professional tools, he confirmed, photographing the precisely cut cables and strategically loosened hardware. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing and had access to expensive equipment. This wasn't random property damage. It was calculated harassment designed to cause maximum financial impact. While I was dealing with dock repairs that would cost $3,200 and potentially affect my homeowner's insurance rates, Bethany launched the legal equivalent of a nuclear strike designed to silence me permanently before I could expose her criminal empire. She filed for an emergency restraining order, claiming I had been cyber-stalking and digitally harassing her through aggressive online surveillance and threatening electronic communications. According to her sworn affidavit, which was mostly creative fiction written by her brother-in-law's law firm, I posed an immediate physical threat to community safety and needed to be legally prohibited from attending HOA meetings, accessing common areas, or communicating with other residents through any electronic means. She was trying to have me banned from my own neighborhood while simultaneously preventing me from using the internet or social media to expose her crimes. The restraining order would have made it impossible for me to continue my investigation or share evidence with other residents who were also being victimized by her schemes. The restraining order hearing was strategically scheduled for the following Wednesday, perfectly timed to prevent me from attending the quarterly HOA meeting where I had planned to present my financial evidence and expose her embezzlement operation to the entire community. Bethany wanted me legally silenced before residents could see the documentation that would destroy her criminal enterprise and send her to federal prison. But Friday night brought Bethany's most audacious and ultimately self-destructive move, a personal visit to my home that would provide the final evidence I needed to end her criminal career permanently, while giving federal prosecutors everything they needed for a successful RICO conviction. I was reviewing financial spreadsheets in my kitchen when my doorbell rang at 9:47 p.m. Through the security monitor, I saw Bethany standing on my porch wearing designer athleisure wear and the kind of practiced smile that politicians use during corruption scandals right before they resign in disgrace. "Jake," she said when I opened the door, her voice dripping with manufactured warmth that couldn't hide the desperation radiating from her, like heat from asphalt in August. "I think we may have gotten off on the wrong foot here. Perhaps we could work together instead of against each other in ways that benefit everyone involved." The smell of her expensive designer perfume couldn't mask the fear, sweat, and barely controlled panic that was making her hands shake slightly as she clutched her purse like a life preserver. She'd come to offer me a deal, the kind of devil's bargain that career criminals always try when they realize the walls are closing in and they're running out of escape routes. I activated my phone's recording app and invited her inside, making sure to position our conversation within range of my security cameras that would capture everything in high-definition video with professional audio quality. What followed was 63 minutes of the most incriminating testimony any federal prosecutor could possibly ask for. A complete confession delivered by someone too arrogant to realize she was signing her own federal indictment. Bethany outlined her entire criminal enterprise in detail, describing a two-tiered system where her inner circle supporters received preferential treatment and advance warning about violations, while everyone else lived under constant threat of harassment and financial destruction. She offered to waive all outstanding fines, reduce my monthly dues to below the neighborhood average, and even promised executive-level advance notice about any future community developments if I agreed to stop investigating HOA finances and delete any evidence I'd gathered. "Smart people like us need to stick together, Jake," she said, her eyes lighting up like she thought she had me convinced. Board positions come with certain executive privileges that most residents never hear about. Insider information about upcoming property developments, preferred contractor rates that save thousands on home improvements, influence over community decisions that can affect property values by tens of thousands of dollars. You're obviously an intelligent man who understands how systems really work behind the scenes. I let her dig the hole deeper, while my cameras captured every word of her confession in legally admissible detail. She actually described her money laundering operation step by step, explaining how professional management required flexible fee structures and strategic family business partnerships that created mutually beneficial financial arrangements for community leaders. When I asked what would happen if I refused her offer, the mask slipped completely and revealed the sociopathic predator underneath. Then you'll discover exactly how difficult life can become for residents who don't appreciate the benefits of cooperative community leadership, she said, her voice hardening like ice over deep water, while her eyes turned cold enough to freeze hellfire. Property lines that affect credit ratings, construction permit delays that cost thousands in contractor fees, inspection complications that require expensive remediation, legal expenses that bankrupt families. So many unfortunate things can happen when you're fighting against people who understand how local government really works. The threat was crystal clear: submit to her criminal authority or face systematic destruction through coordinated bureaucratic warfare involving multiple government agencies and legal jurisdictions. She was admitting to everything: the extortion, the retaliation, the abuse of governmental power, the conspiracy with corrupt officials, while my security system recorded it all in high-definition video that would play beautifully in federal courtrooms. After Bethany left, I immediately contacted Deputy Rodriguez to report the attempted bribery, witness intimidation, and conspiracy to commit further crimes. Under Virginia law, offering financial incentives to prevent investigation of potential felonies constitutes witness tampering, which is itself a felony that carries serious prison time even without the underlying crimes. Saturday morning brought news that made Bethany's legal situation exponentially worse. The FBI had executed search warrants on her Connecticut storage facilities and discovered extensive financial records from her previous HOA fraud operations across multiple states. Agent Michelle Kim called to inform me that my evidence package had helped them connect Bethany to a sophisticated organized crime network specializing in community association financial fraud. "Mr. Morrison," Agent Kim said, "what started as a local HOA dispute has become crucial evidence in a federal racketeering investigation spanning 7 states and involving millions of dollars in stolen community funds. Bethany Richardson is now facing potential charges under RICO statutes, which carry sentences of up to 30 years in federal prison plus complete asset forfeiture." The timing couldn't have been more perfect. Our quarterly HOA meeting was scheduled for Tuesday evening, and Bethany would either have to face the evidence publicly or flee before federal agents could arrest her for crimes that would put her in prison for the rest of her natural life. Either way, her reign of suburban terror was about to end in the most spectacular fashion possible. But Bethany had one final card to play, a move so desperately illegal and obviously fraudulent that it would guarantee her destruction while providing the most dramatic conclusion possible to our neighborhood war. Monday morning brought a certified letter that made my hands shake with pure righteous fury. Bethany was attempting to place a $35,000 emergency lien on my property for ongoing legal defense costs and community disruption expenses. She was literally trying to steal my family's home to pay for the lawyers defending her against charges of stealing from my community. The lien notice cited emergency board authority under Section 73F of the Community Covenants, which supposedly allowed immediate property encumbrance when residents posed existential financial threats to community stability and property values. She'd completely fabricated legal authority that didn't exist anywhere except in her criminal imagination, and was attempting to seize my family's century-old property through documents that were obviously fraudulent to anyone with basic legal knowledge. But Bethany's desperation had made her sloppy in ways that would be immediately obvious to any competent attorney or federal investigator. The lien notice contained multiple glaring legal errors that screamed amateur fraud, expired notarization stamps, incorrect property descriptions that didn't match county records, citations to non-existent covenant sections, and signatures that didn't match the notary's identification documents on file with the state. The document was so obviously fraudulent that it constituted additional federal felony charges for filing false liens, which carries serious prison time under both Virginia state law and federal racketeering statutes. I called Jennifer Hayes immediately, my voice cracking with exhaustion and rage that had been building for months. Bethany's trying to steal my house through a completely fake lien that looks like it was forged by a third grader. She just handed us her signed confession to multiple federal crimes, Jennifer replied, after reviewing the fraudulent documents with obvious professional delight. Filing fake property liens is a federal crime under the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act and the RICO statute. She's looking at additional charges that could add 20 years to her sentence, and this document proves criminal intent beyond any reasonable doubt. Meanwhile, our community was finally waking up to the systematic theft and abuse that had been happening under their noses for nearly 2 years. Mrs. Patterson from Maple Street called to share her own detailed documentation of harassment and financial irregularities she'd been tracking in a notebook, like a forensic accountant. The Henderson family provided evidence of Bethany's attempts to extort contractor kickbacks in exchange for permit approvals. Even Bethany's former supporters were quietly distancing themselves as the scope of her crimes became undeniable, and the FBI investigation became public knowledge. Our private Facebook group, Magnolia Springs Truth, had grown to 47 households sharing stories, documentation, and evidence of Bethany's systematic abuse of power and theft of community funds. The Morris family contributed photos and videos of their children's sidewalk chalk art that had been fined $950. The Johnson family shared email records showing Bethany's demands for voluntary special assessments that came with threats for noncompliance. Tuesday morning brought federal agents to Bethany's door with search warrants, arrest documents, and enough evidence to convict a small army of financial criminals. But when they arrived at her McMansion, they found it completely empty except for a single handwritten note taped to the granite kitchen counter. Gone to visit family indefinitely. Will return when legal matters are resolved. B.R. Data. Bethany Richardson had fled during the night, taking whatever liquid assets she could carry, and abandoning her elaborate criminal scheme just hours before the quarterly HOA meeting, where her crimes would be exposed to the entire community and broadcast live on local television news. FBI agent Kim called me at 11:47 a.m. She's in the wind, but not for long. We've got alerts on all her known identities, frozen her bank accounts across 4 states, and contacted law enforcement agencies from coast to coast. Running just proves her guilt, and it makes the eventual arrest much more satisfying for everyone involved. That evening, 67 of our 73 households attended what local media dubbed the Liberation Meeting, the largest community gathering in Magnolia Springs Estate's history, and a textbook example of grassroots democracy in action. The energy in the community center felt electric, like storm clouds finally breaking after months of oppressive atmospheric pressure that had been suffocating the entire neighborhood. Jennifer Hayes presented our evidence to the packed room. Financial records proving $427,000 in embezzled funds over 21 months. Audio and video recordings of Bethany's attempted bribery and witness intimidation. Photographic evidence of property vandalism and harassment, and testimony from residents across 6 states documenting her pattern of community destruction and financial fraud. The vote to remove Bethany from all HOA positions passed 67-0, with nobody abstaining. The motion to pursue full criminal prosecution and civil asset recovery passed unanimously with enthusiastic applause. The decision to hire an independent forensic accounting firm to audit every transaction and recover all stolen funds passed without any discussion or opposition. But the most important vote was Mrs. Patterson's motion to completely restructure HOA governance around transparency, accountability, and genuine community service instead of personal enrichment and power trips. We established mandatory monthly financial reports with professional oversight, required competitive bidding for all contracts over $500, created resident audit committees with full access to financial records, and implemented democratic decision-making processes that would prevent any single person from gaining dictatorial control over community resources. Sophia sat next to me throughout the meeting, watching democracy work exactly the way it's supposed to when people have the courage to stand up to criminals and bullies. When residents applauded our victory over corruption and abuse, she squeezed my hand and whispered, "You saved our lake, Daddy. You saved everyone's homes. 8 months later, Bethany Richardson was arrested at Miami International Airport, trying to board a flight to the Cayman Islands, using forged identification documents and carrying $127,000 in cash, hidden in designer luggage compartments. The FBI had tracked her through credit card transactions, surveillance footage, and tips from informants across 12 states. Her capture made national news as the dramatic conclusion to one of the largest HOA fraud investigations in federal law enforcement history. She ultimately pled guilty to 73 federal charges, including wire fraud, mail fraud, money laundering, witness tampering, filing false liens, conspiracy, and racketeering under RICO statutes. Her sentence? 34 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole, plus $4.2 million in restitution to communities she'd defrauded across 7 states over 15 years of criminal activity. The asset forfeiture process recovered $389,000 in stolen funds from Magnolia Springs estates alone, plus her house, cars, jewelry, and business assets that were sold at federal auction. Instead of simply refunding the stolen money to individual homeowners, our new democratically elected board did something beautiful and lasting with those recovered assets. We established the Magnolia Springs Community Foundation. Our first project was upgrading community infrastructure with the money Bethany had stolen for phantom services. New playground equipment that actually exists, repaired roads that don't damage car suspensions, enhanced LED lighting that improves safety, professional landscaping that actually increases property values instead of just enriching board members' relatives. The Foundation's second initiative was a college scholarship fund for local students who demonstrate community service and academic achievement. Every year, we award $7,500 scholarships to kids who have learned that democracy requires active participation and that some battles are worth fighting, regardless of personal cost. Last month, we presented our 4th annual scholarship to Sophia Morrison, my daughter who watched her father fight corruption and learned that ordinary people can defeat powerful criminals when they're armed with evidence, determination, and the unshakable belief that right makes might. My lake became the heart of our transformed community, but not in the way Bethany had feared. With proper liability insurance funded by recovered stolen assets, we opened it for supervised community swimming during summer months and fishing tournaments that bring families together instead of tearing them apart. The sound of children's laughter echoing across water where I'd once been fined for existing. That's what victory sounds like when justice wins and criminals lose. We built a proper community beach area using funds that should have been stolen by inflated contractor bills, but were instead recovered through federal asset forfeiture. Every 4th of July, we host the Freedom from Tyranny Festival, where neighbors who'd been afraid to make eye contact now organize potluck competitions, kids' fishing derbies, and swimming lessons that create memories instead of violations. Property values increased 23% within the first year after Bethany's removal and criminal conviction. Turns out transparent, honest governance is incredibly attractive to home buyers who have heard horror stories about HOA dictators and want to live somewhere democratic. We actually have a waiting list of families wanting to move into our model HOA community, which was featured in Community Association Management magazine as the definitive example of successful democratic reform and criminal prosecution. Mrs. Patterson became our permanent president, running unopposed for 4 consecutive terms because everyone trusts her to serve the community instead of enriching herself through elaborate fraud schemes. Her monthly meetings feel more like neighborhood block parties, complete with her legendary chocolate chip cookies and genuine problem solving that actually improves people's lives instead of making them miserable. The transformation in community culture has been remarkable to witness. Before Bethany's reign of terror, people were friendly but distant. After fighting corruption together and winning, we've become a real community where neighbors genuinely care about each other's welfare and success. My personal transformation surprised everyone, including myself. Fighting sophisticated financial fraud taught me skills I never knew I possessed and opened career opportunities I'd never imagined. I've been consulted as an expert witness in 14 similar HOA embezzlement cases across 8 states, helping other communities expose board member theft, and rebuild democratic governance from the ashes of criminal enterprises. The Tennessee legislature passed the Magnolia Springs Accountability Act last year, requiring annual independent financial audits for all HOAs with budgets over $75,000, mandatory criminal background checks for board candidates, and whistleblower protection for residents who report suspected fraud. Our nightmare became the catalyst for statewide homeowner protection that will prevent thousands of families from experiencing what we endured. 3 weeks ago, I got a call from a desperate homeowner in Colorado whose story sounded depressingly familiar. Dramatic fee increases, family business contracts, harassment of residents who ask questions, and a board president who seemed to derive actual pleasure from other people's misery. "We've heard what you did in Virginia," she said, her voice trembling with frustration and hope. "Our HOA president is threatening to foreclose on houses for violations like having the wrong shade of beige on our front doors. Can you help us?" But that's a story for another video that'll make this one look like a minor property dispute. Here's what I learned from this whole experience that could save your community from similar criminal predators. Knowledge is power, but documented knowledge is nuclear warfare against corruption. Every interaction, every financial transaction, every threat needs to be recorded and preserved with professional quality evidence that will hold up in federal court. Community solidarity can defeat any tyrant, but only if people have the courage to act when action is needed, instead of hoping someone else will take the risks and do the hard work of fighting back against criminal abuse. Most importantly, never let fear keep you silent when you're witnessing crimes against your neighbors and community. Criminals count on good people doing nothing while they systematically destroy everything decent people have built together. Today, Sophia and I still swim in our lake every weekend she's with me. The water tastes like freedom, sounds like laughter, and smells like the honeysuckle that's been growing on these banks since my grandfather first cast a line here in 1946. Sometimes justice takes time, persistence, and more courage than you think you possess, but it's always worth the fight when you're protecting something that matters. The best part about defeating Bethany Richardson isn't just that justice was served, it's that we built something better than what existed before her criminal enterprise tried to destroy our community. We turned a neighborhood of strangers into a real community of friends, and that's worth more than any amount of recovered stolen money. 5 years have passed since that first violation notice, and Magnolia Springs Estates has become something none of us expected, a true community where neighbors genuinely care about each other. Mrs. Patterson still brings her chocolate chip cookies to every meeting, and her husband Bill has become our unofficial community historian, documenting everything we've learned about fighting corruption and building democracy from the ground up. The lake that Bethany tried to steal through fraudulent fines has become the heart of our community in ways she never could have imagined. Last summer, we hosted our biggest annual festival yet. 200 families from surrounding neighborhoods came to celebrate what we've built together. Kids who've never seen anything but suburban lawns experienced the magic of catching their first fish in waters that have witnessed 4 generations of American dreams taking root and growing strong. Sophia, now 15, leads our youth environmental committee and has turned her childhood trauma into passionate advocacy for property rights and democratic governance. She gives presentations at high schools across Virginia about HOA reform and citizen activism, teaching other young people that age doesn't matter when you're fighting for what's right. Watching her confidence and leadership skills develop has been the greatest victory of this entire experience. I've kept every document from our battle with Bethany, not as trophies, but as evidence that ordinary people can defeat sophisticated criminal enterprises when they refuse to be intimidated and fight back with better preparation, superior evidence, and unwavering determination to see justice served. The most important lesson I learned isn't about HOA law or financial fraud investigation. It's about the power of community solidarity when people decide they've had enough of being victims and choose to become fighters instead. Bethany Richardson thought she could terrorize us into submission, but she underestimated what happens when you threaten something people are willing to die protecting. Now, I want to hear from you in the comments below. Drop your worst HOA nightmare story. And trust me, you're definitely not alone in dealing with power-hungry board members who've forgotten they work for the community, not the other way around. The stories I get are absolutely insane, and some of them make Bethany Richardson look like an amateur compared to the truly sophisticated criminal operations masquerading as professional property management. If this story inspired you to stand up to corruption in your own neighborhood, smash that subscribe button, because I've got 6 more HOA Revenge Stories that'll blow your mind and teach you exactly how to fight back when criminals try to steal your community. Until then, keep fighting the good fight, and remember, your property rights and community matter more than anyone's clipboard, power trip, or criminal enterprise. Sometimes good people really do win when they're willing to fight for what's right, especially when they bring better evidence, superior legal representation, and the unshakable determination to see justice served with a side of federal prison time. Democracy works when people make it work, and criminals lose when communities refuse to be victims. That's the American way, and that's exactly how it should be.